Prince Harry is taking on Rupert Murdoch's News Group newspapers in court this week. His claim? Journalists and private investigators used unlawful activities against him for 2 Murdoch papers for more than a decade. But while others have settled similar cases out of court, why has Harry taken the financial risk of a trial? And will he have to take the stand himself? I'm Sally Biddulph, and this is what you need to know. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Sally Biddulph, and today I'm joined by our senior producer, Louisa Felton, who has covered these cases for a number of years for us. Hi, Louisa. Another trial. What's this one? There seem to have been so many.
Yes, hi Sally. There have been many, and this sort of court litigation has been going on for many years. And I think lots of people do find it quite confusing because it always seems to be back in and out of court. This particular case is against News Group newspapers, as you said, the publishers of the now defunct News of the World and the Sun, and is famously owned by Rupert Murdoch. But this story actually goes back about 25 years, and I'm sure many people listening or watching will remember that it came to light that the royal family had their phones hacked by a reporter and private investigator working for News of the World, and it was quite a shock at the time. But really, fast forward a few years to 2011, and that's when, after investigations by the police, it became apparent that actually it could be more widespread. Because initially, it had been put down to this narrative that it was one rogue reporter, but what over the years between when it first came to light to 2011 was that actually it could have been far more widespread. But the real shock came when it emerged that the phone of Millie Dowler, who was a schoolgirl who'd been murdered, that her phone had been hacked. And it caused shockwaves across the country. And as a result, News of the World was closed by Rupert Murdoch. And it was a huge story at the time. The paper was about 170 odd years old. So it was a huge scandal at the time. And this is where this story really began. But fast forward to where we are now. In the time between then and now, there have been lots of court cases, lots of settlements, and lots of scandal attached to what is said to have happened. But this case specifically involves, as you mentioned, the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, and Lord Tom Watson, who was obviously a big figure in the Labour Party.
And just take us through what the crux of this is, because my understanding is this is less about phone hacking and more about illegal practices of news gathering. Is that right?
A bit of both, really. So the trial is set to last about 6 weeks. And specifically with Prince Harry, it was ruled last year by the judge in this case that he cannot rely on phone hacking in this case. Now, everyone will think phone hacking, wasn't that done and dusted? That's sort of over and can't quite work out why it's back in the spotlight. But this goes beyond phone hacking. And with Prince Harry directly, there is a rule that says that once you've discovered that illegality could have happened, you have about 6 years to bring a case. It's called time limitation. And the judge last year ruled that Harry could have known that he was hacked. Therefore, he can't rely on that in court. So he will be looking at other UIG, that's a word that pops up all the time, and that's unauthorised information gathering. And as well as voicemail interception for other claimants, it will look at things like blagging, and that's when someone might call up a doctor's surgery, for instance, to try and trick someone into handing over private information or medical records about celebrities. So it does go beyond phone hacking. And in this case specifically, it's not just the targeting of celebrities and royals, but it's also politicians. Lord Watson was sitting on a really powerful select committee looking into hacking back in the day, and he believes that he and others on that committee were targeted because of his involvement in that committee. So it's quite a complex case that's going to be split up really into 3 chunks. You've got something called the generic case, and that's where Prince Harry and Tom Watson's barrister, David Sherborne, is going to try and paint a picture of what they say happened over a really prolonged period of time. And they use a term, they want to say it's a widespread and habitual unlawful information gathering that happened over a prolonged period of time. And the impact that had on those people's lives and political life, and also at times to those ordinary people who are caught up in extraordinary things like terror attacks or, great tragedy in people's families. And so it's going to be a really complex case. And it'll start with that generic argument where they try and build up this body of evidence to show what was going on, and importantly in this case, who knew. And the accusation is that this went pretty much right to the top, and senior executives knew what was going on and essentially lied about it. there's other elements about destroying vast numbers of emails that is going to be challenged in court. And then on top of that, you have the individual claims of both Prince Harry and Tom Watson. So it's very complicated. It's a very long trial, but it'll basically be in those three chunks, I imagine.
And so can we expect Prince Harry to take to the stand himself? Because that happened in one of the previous trials and there was so much coverage of it.
Yes. So in 2023, when he took out and he had his other case against Mirror Group newspapers, he did have to take the stand, and he will in this case. Last time it was for 2 days. Anthony Hudson, the barrister representing NGN, News Group newspapers, said last year that he would like to interrogate him for 4 days. So whether or not it actually stretches to 4 days, I don't know. But what the crux of his argument will be is, obviously, we've said it's not going to be looking at the phone hacking, but specifically when he launched his case, the Duke of Sussex said that there were about 200 articles that he believed, elements of which had been gathered by getting illegal information. And over the past several months, years, that's been whittled down. And in this hearing, 30 articles will be interrogated, and that's what both sides will present an argument to, and he will be trying to prove that the impact that had on him, but also that wrongdoing did happen via journalists' wrongdoing, but also a string of private investigators that were hired to do the things like blagging and finding other ways to get hold of private information.
And have we got any steer on when he might appear on the stand?
I think it's going to be sometime. I don't think it's going to be in the opening weeks. The opening weeks will be the generic case, and I expect it to be in a few weeks as it progresses, because they try and deal with the generic case and then they'll move on to the claimants.
And why do you think Harry is pursuing this so doggedly? Because these trials, I mean, they're civil trials, are notoriously expensive, even if you win. So why is Harry pursuing it when other people have pulled out, have settled basically out of court?
Well, he has, I think, really basically the means. What's interesting and what's really important to note is that this is a civil case, not a criminal one. And it's heard by one judge. In this case, it's Judge Justice Fancourt. And the idea of a civil case is that it's encouraged for people to settle. They don't want long and costly trials like what this one will end up being. And there are rules in place to kind of encourage that to happen. So, I mean, first of all, the Duke of Sussex could lose. That's one thing everybody has to consider. But secondly, what can happen is he could actually win his case, but end up with just an eye-watering legal bill. And that's because if he is offered a settlement by News Group newspapers in advance and he chooses to reject that and go forward with the trial, he could win. And if the judge says, right, you've won, and awards him even a penny less than what he was offered by the defence, he's then liable for huge costs on the other side. And we saw that with Hugh Grant, who's obviously been campaigning, a hacking campaigner for many years. And he said last year that he had to settle because he couldn't face what he thought would be a bill of about £10 million. And I think for people like Hugh Grant, Lord Watson, and particularly the Duke of Sussex, is that they want to have their day in court. They want it to go to trial because they want this information to be out in the public domain. It's certainly not about being awarded money. I don't think that's really a consideration. It's about getting it out there for them.
And now you've mentioned very clearly what Harry has to put forward and what he wants to put his side of the argument forward. What have the newspaper group said so far about what's going to be happening, where they stand?
Yeah, well, if you go back to 2011 again, sorry, there's lots of jumping about because this has been going on for so many years. But in 2011, everyone will remember famously that Rupert Murdoch appeared in front of a select committee and described what happened at News of the World as the most humble day of his life. And there was omissions and apologies within that case. And it's thought over the years there's been about 1,300 other allegations and reported to have cost the news group about £1 billion in legal fees and claims. I mean, it's eye-watering sums we're talking about. But what is really interesting is that this case involves the Sun, and they have always denied that wrongdoing happened at the Sun, and they will be vigorously doing the same here. And I think the news group would like to draw a line, say they want to draw a line under this. This is a scandal that's been going on for up to 28 years. And throughout the process, they have settled cases against the Sun, like with people like Hugh Grant. But they do so without accepting liability, admitting that they've done anything wrong. So that's what's key, I think, for the claimants in this case, is that they would like to prove that it did happen and want an admission of liability, which is something obviously the Sun deny. And they deny the allegations of UIG quite vigorously when it comes to the son.
It's a highly complicated case. I think we're going to have to lock in for a number of months, aren't we? When's your best guess of when we might have a verdict?
Oh, well, back in 2023, there was Harry took on Mirror Group newspapers. We won't go into too much detail because we'll be here all day talking about that. But the judge actually found in favour for the Duke of Sussex and that, and he was awarded a certain a couple £100,000 in and a settlement, and then later on. And I think what was interesting about that is it gives you an idea of the length of these cases. The documents are hundreds and hundreds of pages long, and the judge will have to go away at the end of this and comb through all of the evidence that was both presented in court, and then second to that, go through all of the documents that have been submitted, because a lot of this focuses on a paper trail of invoices for private investigators. And there's also, this is a complicated case because we're looking at the world of politics. There's really serious allegations about, how the world of politics and really senior politicians were targeted. And I actually think we should be looking out for some really big names to come and appear as witnesses, because it sort of infiltrated all sorts of ways of life, whether it be celebrity or the world of politics. But as far as how long it's going to take to get a verdict, I think the Mirror Group case was about 368 pages long, the judgment. So it's to write that sort of document, I think we're probably going to be waiting months after it finishes. So we'll have to endure a really tough and quite explosive 6-week trial. We will, as we say, have Harry on the stand, which will be only the second time in 130 years, well, more than 130 years, that a royal has appeared in the witness box, and he certainly feels like he's got something to prove, I think.
It certainly sounds like a blockbuster trial. Louisa, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for bringing us up to speed. Well, you can follow the ins and outs of all of this case over the next few weeks across ITV News programmes, the website and ITVX. And please look back over some of our most recent podcasts for quick briefings into a range of subjects. But for now, thanks for joining us.